Human walked out of the room, breathing heavily, one hand over the wound on his ribs as the trickle of blood gradually slowed. He picked up a small handgun off of one of the dead soldiers that littered the floor, checking its ammunition. Tic-Tac spoke once more, but aloud this time. Standard weight 910 grams. Current weight 1,060 grams. You have 10 rounds of ammunition remaining in the magazine. I'm routing you to potential places they might be holding our friends. Thanks. We need to get out of here fast. They know we're here. Human answered, picking up his pace as he bore down the quickly fading green line. I was unable to deactivate his tac in time. It sent out a distress beacon and a recording before I was able to shut it down. Tic-Tac said, You did good. I'm glad you were able to hold your own. It was much more limited than I was. Even at 90%, it only took a few minutes. They must have learned their lesson after what happened with us and gave the tacs less freedom. 20 meters, door on the right. 5 inside, they are fighting. 1 is dying. Human found the door and rammed it with his shoulder, busting through its thin metal. On the other side were 4 Endurans taking turns punching and beating another that was restrained on the ground. Filthy traitor, fighting against your own broth, one of them started, but was interrupted by the door behind him as Human exploded through it. The 4 that were standing turned around quickly, but not before 2 of them caught a bullet to their heads. The one closest to Argal charged towards Human, brushing off the bullets that struck his chest. It knocked the gun to the side and tackled Human back through the door. Human fell back, reaching up at the alien's head, and snapped its neck before they even hit the ground. The body landed on top of him, coughing up blood before going still. Human pulled a knife out of a sheath on the dead Enduran's belt and threw it at the last one whilst it fired its rifle into the body atop Human. As the last one fell, Human rolled the corpse off of him and walked over to Argal. I was wondering where you ended up going. Came all this way just for us, Argal asked, spitting out the blood in his mouth and sitting up. I owed you that much. Wasn't going to leave when my friends needed help, Human said, reaching down and tearing the restraints off of Argal's arms and legs. Well, I think we owe you a lot more if we get out of here. It's nice to see you again, and you still got it, don't ya? The Enduran said, looking over the bodies scattered around them. Not something you can easily forget, Human said, retrieving the knife from the bleeding chest of the last soldier. Do you know where they're keeping Lizra? I'm not sure, but they might be trying to get her out of here during all this commotion. They were tasked with taking her out of here as soon as they could. Don't think they planned on keeping me around much longer. But you pulled up just in time, saved me halfway through the execution ritual. Argal picked himself up off the ground, looking around the room for something frantically. I need to find something they took. I'll meet you by the hangars. Better not leave without me. Otherwise you won't have anyone to do the heavy lifting when I'm gone. The Enduran took off into the hallway and ran off in the direction Human came from. Routing us to the landing pads, amplifying the sound, move quietly so I can mark heartbeats. Tic-Tac instructed as Human stepped into the corridor and off in the direction of the landing bays. He walked slowly down the hall, minding the sound of his footfalls, blinking lights causing his shadow to dance across the floor as he stalked through the facility. After another minute of walking, he stopped. The sounds of someone wheeling a cart emanated from an intersection up ahead. He jogged ahead, hearing the sounds of squeaking wheels accompanied by the heavy footsteps of 2 others. He rounded the corner, seeing 2 Brunts wheeling a crate away from him, the other end of the hall opening up into a large open bay. They didn't turn back in time as Human broke off into a sprint towards them. They heard him approaching at the last second, only starting to turn as he reached the one in the rear. He quickly dispatched the first, snapping its neck. The body crumpled to the floor before he could even yell out. The other Brunt tried to run, putting the cart between Human and himself. Human kicked the cart into the fleeing alien, knocking him to the ground. He strode forward, stepping down on the creature's head, crushing it underneath his boot. The red blood pooled out on the white floor, shards of skull poking out from the remains of the Brunt's head. Who's there? It's going to take a lot more than throwing my cage around to get to me. The voice of Lizra yelling out from the locked crate. Human reached down, digging his fingers into the edges of the metal lid, tearing it free. Lizra looked up at Human from the inside, eyes wide with disbelief. You came back for me? You got me out. Thought I would return the favor. Are you all right? Human asked, reaching down and pulling her out. Yes, they were rough. but it's nothing I could not handle. Thank you. I really thought I wasn't coming back from this one. It's what friends do. Now, let's get the fuck out of there. Lizra clambered onto Human's shoulder. Grab that interface. I can help us get out of here. Human reached down, passing the pad up to her. Tic-Tac, what's the status on Tic-2? Is he ready to pull us out? We're going to need to bring the ship into one of the enclosed hangars. We don't have time to secure any environmental suits for Lizra and Argal. 2-minute ETA on Tic-2. Tic-Tac answered. Noted. Plot a course to one of the open hangars. The duo ran back into the outpost, Human following the green line tack created to guide them through the corridors. The sounds of soldiers behind them responding to the commotion faded as Human sprinted away with Lizra. Next left, T intersection, 35 meters after that open bay, one ship inside, but room for ours as well. 1 minute and 30 seconds until exfil. Tic-Tac informed them. I'm in the security feeds. It appears they are securing all exits to the outpost. We're going to have to break through them if we want to take the hangar. Is Argal with you? I found him earlier. Let's hope he hears the commotion up here and puts 2 and 2 together, Human said, hopefully taking the turn at the intersection. The pair neared the hangar and were met with plasma fire from the other end of the hall. The downward curve of the hallways only gave them a view of the tops of the enemy's heads. Human ducked down just in time and took cover in a nearby storage room. Crates were stacked high around them, filled with various stores and supplies. Shoulda grabbed a rifle back there. I can't rush into plasma fire like this. Couple lucky hits, and I'll be crawling out of here. Well, this really is my lucky day, Lizra said, looking at the labeled containers around them. Hydrogen stores, propyl hydride. I think I can work with this. Keep me covered. I won't need long. Let's see if my unconventional ordnance school was worth it. Jumping down, she rifled through the containers. Small paws sifting through various components and containers, she clambered up to a wall panel, prying it off, and sorted through the wires inside, while her tail dexterously organized the components on the floor behind her. Pulling electronics free and holding them in her jaws, she worked with lightning speed, her paws a blur as she assembled the components together and connected them into a small device. Here's the first, small explosive. Won't do much damage, but it'll knock them back and stun them long enough for you to get in there. Setting a timer, 15 seconds. Be fast. By the time it's off, I should have something else ready for you. Lizra said without skipping a beat, already working on the next device. Human picked up the wide and peeked into the hallway. An overlay in his visor displayed the ideal trajectory for maximum damage. He arced the explosive into the hangar entrance and took cover back in the room. You're not affected by disruptive sounds, are you? Depends. How disruptive? Human asked with interest. Very, Lizra chuckled. When we get in there, prepare yourself for this next one. She climbed up onto Human again as he waited the last seconds for the first explosive to go off. The blast shook the halls, signaling to them that their opening was here. Human charged out the door, the hail of plasma fire finally ceding. The enemy soldiers inside were still picking themselves back up off the ground when they breached. Upon entry, Lizra jumped off of Human and threw the next device up and into the center of the enemy mass. She landed behind a loading cart as the improvised grenade went off. The room lit up in a flash of light, accompanied by a sound that reverberated throughout her entire being. Her sight recovered before her hearing, and Lizra took in her new surroundings. She found herself right next to a pair of enemy soldiers, one who had been trying to render aid to a comrade who was quickly bleeding out from shrapnel wounds. Having recovered before him, she quickly scrambled to his side and drew his sidearm from his holster, brandishing the unwieldy weapon with both paws. In such close quarters it was hard to miss. The shot pierced the soldier under the arm, and he fell atop his teammate, who was still struggling in vain to stop his own bleeding. She dropped the weapon and pressed herself against the cart, ducking down as a few plasma shots hit the wall above her. A few rounds later, Lizra saw Human dive over the side of the cart and take cover beside her. A series of scorch marks across his chest and torso had cleared some of the blood off of his armor. Its usual black was stained almost entirely red at this point, and it was hard to determine how much of that was his, if any of it. He clutched a newly acquired plasma rifle to his chest, breathing heavily as their position was peppered even more. Well, there's much more than we were expecting. I count 5 down, 10 left. Any more tricks up your sleeve? Nothing in my sleeves, but Maybe I can make something with the gear on these two," Lizra said while trying to catch her breath. "Don't think time is on our side. Ship's on standby waiting for us to take the hangar." "But I don't—" Human started peeking out and returning a few shots that were accompanied by a scream. "Know how much I got left in me." 20 seconds, that's all I need." "I'll try," he said, popping up and placing a few shots with wildly different trajectories. Lizra got to work once again, pulling out an interface and exposing its wires. She quickly connected them to the exposed circuitry of a damaged plasma rifle and booted up a timer on the interface. "Throw this, quickly." "What's it gonna do?" Human said, holding the next technical amalgamation in his hands. "I don't fucking know. Something? But let them find out," she yelled back. Human lobbed it overhead, and it exploded in a purple-green blast behind them. After it went off, Human rushed into fire once again, gaining ground on the enemy who was now retreating back towards the hangar doors. 3 down, 7 left, 11 and 2, Human said, peeking out as he laid down, suppressing fire on the enemies positioned behind a small freighter. "The cooling on these things don't make it ideal for suppression." "I can fix that," Lizra replied, retrieving one from a nearby body, and started working on the internal systems of it. "Here, no more cooldown. You got a few hundred before it goes off." Human grabbed the new rifle and started returning fire at a cyclic rate. But even with the improved rate of fire, the enemy was in too many positions to keep them all down. One of them ran forward and fired at Human while he was occupied with another enemy. The first shot hit his shoulder armor for a glancing blow, but the second and third found their mark between the armor plates. He fell back with a yell as his undersuit was pierced. Deep black char marked his exposed skin, and his left arm hung limp by his side. He drew a sidearm and dropped the enemy before he could round the corner any further. "I don't think we're shooting our way out of this one, Lizra," Human gasped, pressing the handgun against his wounded shoulder. "Dee, don't worry. I can throw something together. I can make it work. There has to be something," Lizra said, looking around at their dwindling munitions. Human slumped back against the crates they were hiding behind, occasionally reaching around to place a shot to keep the enemy away. "I can get you out. Just promise me you'll get far away from here," Human said. "I'm not leaving you here. We leave together or not at all." "You got that right. We're leaving together," Argal said, charging into the room, donned in full Enduran combat gear, unloading his plasma rifle at the enemy who had finally started to come out of their positions. "Figured now was a good time for my grand entrance. Was hoping I wouldn't have to do this, but you'll seem to be pretty bad off. So now it's our grand entrance," he declared, pulling out a small jar from his harness. He released the clamps on either side, and the top blew off with a hiss. "Go get 'em, Zate." Once the lid was free, hundreds of winged insects spewed forth from the canister and took off into the hangar in a frenzy. The trio hunkered down while the screams of the soldiers filled their ears. A few seconds later, the room fell silent save for the buzzing of thousands of small wings. "Tic-tac! Bring it in! We gotta go!" Human ordered, running out into the open hangar. The far side of the hangar was opened up, exposing the countless stars of space beyond. A thin, shimmering veil slightly obscured the form of their striker approaching. The bodies on the floor were barely recognizable as Enduran, Brunt, or anything else. Large boils and cysts were popping and bubbling, causing the ground to pool with dark red fluid. "Quickly! They can't survive long. Pick up as many as you can," Argal said, scooping up as many of the insects as he could. Many were already dropping out of the air and twitching on the ground before going still. The remainder were flying back into the canister in Argal's hands. They finished sealing the container as Human ship passed through the veil and into the hangar. The ramp was already open for them, as they boarded with the engines still hot. Human ran forward and threw himself into the pilot's seat, and he pulled off Tic-Tac. "Strap into the drop seats. We're jumping." "These were not made for someone my size," Lizra yelled out. "Then hang on," Human replied as the ramp closed behind them. "Everyone ready?" Tic-Tac asked, jumping in 3, 2, 1.